Welcome to my first Sega CD review. Today we will cover Dungeon Explorer. This 1995 action RPG was developed by Westone and Hudson Soft. While this title is a part of and shares its name with the series originally released for the TurboGrafx, a different route was taken for the gameplay, which in Neo Turbo Maniac style, we will cover in depth. The plot is about a being named the Darkling who has held the goddess of ambition captive in his tower. The goddess can grant any wish, thus the Darkling is using her for his evil desires. It is said that whoever rescues her is granted the choice between fame, fortune, and eternal life. Many adventurers have attempted her rescue, but all have met their demise. The core gameplay is based on both the TurboGrafx games and Gauntlet, where you navigate through maze-like dungeons shooting weapon projectiles at monsters that appear out in the open or spawn from generators. You cannot perform melee attacks against monsters like you could in Gauntlet. Taking an RPG approach, you receive experience points for defeating enemies and destroying generators. Enemies are worth 1 point and generators are worth 5. When you gain enough experience points, your maximum hit points increase. You also have food points which slowly decrease like how your life would in Gauntlet. Once your food is depleted, your life points begin to decrease. There are several ways to replenish these points, which I'll explain later. 6 brave adventurers set out to rescue the goddess. There's a knight, beast, monk, mage, elf, and ninja, each different attack strength, defense, intelligence, agility, and starting hit points. The elf, ninja, monk, and mage have low offense, defense, and hit points but are fast. The beast and knight have high offense, defense, and hit points but are slower. This version of Dungeon Explorer can be played with up to 4 players. Each character uses magic or body force as it's referred to in this game. The magical effects vary greatly, with some characters having multiple effects. The knight uses a 3-way shot, great for destroying multiple monster generators at the same time. The beast fires a 2-way V formation shot while enemy speed slows down. The ninja fires front and rear projectiles, which is useful when you're surrounded by enemies on opposite sides, and invisibility where enemies will not approach him. The monk uses a circling cloud, damaging any enemies it touches. The elf has a protective shield, making her invulnerable to enemies while also damaging them. Finally, the mage uses Firestorm, which destroys all enemies in its path. This is useful in clearing out large groups of monsters. When you use body force, you will see a timer underneath your attributes which gradually declines. You can carry up to 9 body forces. You begin the game in the Gardens of Destiny campsite. Here you can purchase equipment, save your progress, and change characters. Your character is equipped with the weapon, armor, and shield, which can be upgraded by purchasing stronger armaments in the shop. Weapons increase your attack power, shields increase your intelligence, allowing for longer use of body force magic, and armor increases your defense. These items are costly, but there is an easy way to accumulate lots of gold, as stated in the instruction manual. South of the campsite at Freedom Hill, there are 4 mounds of gold to pick up, totaling just under 200 gold, 191 to be exact. Once you collect them, return to camp and then save and quit your game. When you load your game and return to Freedom Hill, the gold will be there. Repeat this process to increase your gold. This is very time consuming if you want to purchase strong equipment from the outset. When you save your game, your character's level, equipment, gold, and number of dungeons completed is recorded. Your character's experience level and equipment can be carried over to a new game, thus you can begin with a high-level, well-equipped character that can steamroll through each dungeon. Go to JoJo's Bar to switch players. You can change to a character from another save file, which does not affect the number of dungeons completed, or you can choose a new character from scratch. Choosing the latter would mean lots of level grinding. South of the campsite, there are 6 paths to take, each one leading to a different dungeon. Every path has enemies to get in your way, and some have poisonous swamps which depletes your health upon contact. At the end of each path is a portal that takes you to the dungeon, but it will not open until all monster generators are destroyed. This is a good opportunity to raise a few levels before entering a dungeon. Once you leave the campsite, your food points begin to decrease. Your food and hit points are fully restored when you return to camp. Whatever you do, don't venture north of the campsite unless you want a quick death. If you're playing for the first time, it may take trial and error to figure out the order of paths to take to complete each dungeon, as they differ in terms of length and the strength of monsters. This also applies to the corresponding dungeons. You should start with the lower left path to the desert, as that one has the weakest monsters. As for the rest, you'll need to figure it out on your own. If you start a new game with a character from another save file, then the order is less relevant depending on how powerful the character is. There are 6 dungeons you must clear before entering the Darkling Tower to rescue the goddess. There's a desert, ice, ocean, mountain, fortress, and samurai shrine. Each dungeon has several floors, and there are walls, doors, and bodies of water that are unpassable unless you open a lock with a key, shoot at certain objects, or defeat all enemies and generators in certain sections. You'll have to fall down a hole to reach lower floors, and there are hidden trap floors which drop you down, forcing you to make your way back up. There are plenty of teleporters which transport you to different parts of the floor. You'll have to break through walls to reach the next floor. Dungeons have traps and hazards, including spike floors, icicles, and throwing knives which are activated when you step on certain tiles or open doors, and rocks which shoot projectiles and split into harmful fragments when destroyed. There are plenty of treasure chests in each dungeon. They can be found scattered around or appear when a monster generator is destroyed. Treasure chests must be shot several times to open, and items, gold, locks, or a gas cloud will appear. Items include health and food potions, gloves, amulets, body force, and more. You can store up to 4 items in your inventory, but if you find the backpack, you can carry up to 9. Small potions immediately restore a portion of your food or health, while large potions are added to your inventory for later use. Gloves increase your defense, attack, or intelligence. Amulets apply both positive and negative effects on the player. A wing allows you to escape the dungeon if things get too hairy. Finally, there's a camp pot which regenerates both your food and life points when you enter it. Items are destroyed if you strike them at close range. Gas clouds induce a variety of ailments. Slow is self-explanatory. Disorder reverses the directional controls or can cause the player to lose control and have his shots disabled. Sleep stuns the player, and poison causes the food meter to rapidly decline. These effects last for a few seconds. These ailments can also be inflicted by enemies. At the end of each dungeon, you will face one of Darkling's minions. They are tailored to the dungeons you fight in, like a sandworm in the desert, a giant squid in the ocean, samurai in the shrine, and a pair of lions in the fortress. These battles are fought in wide open areas where you will dodge plenty of attacks which come at you quickly. You can stand in certain spots to minimize the damage, but if you're at a high enough level and have strong equipment, the boss fights won't be too difficult. The final boss is a whole different story. You're awarded lots of experience and gold for defeating each boss. Once a dungeon is cleared, you cannot return to it. After the first 6 dungeons are cleared, you can then venture north to Darkling Tower. Here are some pointers to get you through the dungeons. There are several ways to avoid being overwhelmed by monsters in certain areas. Don't always be quick to open chests or pick up items because they can be used as barriers, as monsters must move around them to get to you. Don't shoot too many of the breakable walls. Let the enemies approach you from as narrow an opening as possible. A safe spot to attack enemies is along a wall, especially if there are lots of them around a corner. They'll approach you in a single file line or as close to it as possible. In the more difficult paths and dungeons, avoid having too many generators visible on screen, as the screen will quickly overflow with monsters. If this happens, try to lose them, though it's not easy as enemies will chase after you. If you succeed in losing them and then return to that area, the monsters will be gone. You can also leave the floor and return. Some locations require multiple keys to get through. When you grab a key, leave that floor and return. The key will be there again. If you can't grab an item because you're overstocked, use one from your inventory, especially as a glove or amulet, as you want to make room for potions. Make sure there are no enemies present when you access your inventory because the action does not stop when you do this. The dungeons are long and confusing, which can result in your food count being depleted, so try to have food potions available. Always have health potions on hand if possible before you fight any bosses. Use the camp pot right before you fight the dungeon boss. Escape the dungeon if you must, just in case you may not make it through, as any levels you gain are lost if you die. If you leave a dungeon, you lose all items in your inventory, Any stat increases from gloves are erased, and any doors you unlock or walls open are undone, forcing you to redo the dungeon from scratch. The first two also apply when a dungeon is cleared. When I first saw Dungeon Explorer at my best friend's house many years ago, I was dismissive of it because after playing Dungeon Explorer 2, I felt that the Sega CD take on the series was a huge step down. Years later, I approached this game with a more open mind, and most negative notions I had of it were eased. The RPG elements such as leveling up, status effects, item inventory, and purchasing weapons and armor were well implemented into a game that is based on an arcade title, as they need to be managed effectively to clear the dungeons, and the game does a good job in letting you know if your character is not strong enough to survive. The vast differences in magic for each character makes it worth playing with each one. I noticed that some characters are better suited for specific dungeons. The long and confusing dungeon layouts with plenty of traps, loads of monsters, and not being able to save makes them a challenge because you'll have to redo it from the beginning if you perish. While the soundtrack doesn't feature a plethora of synthesized instruments or the rocking beats from its fellow CD brethren, I think it's pretty good. The tracks are a mix between dramatic, upbeat, and mellow, with bells frequently used in certain spots. Being a CD-ROM game, I was disappointed that there were no animated cinematics or any real voice acting. The voices that are present remind me of the original Street Fighter. The graphics are good but not great. The character and monster sprites are large, detailed, and well animated. I like that there are different sprites for each piece of equipment for every character. The dungeons are detailed, though they don't all make the best use of color. The overworld paths could have used some diversity. There is sprite flickering when the screen is flooded with enemies. Not being able to pause the action to use your items can be frustrating in pressure situations. The final boss battle is insanely long. Boredom will certainly kick in. Overall, Dungeon Explorer for the Sega CD is a well-done derivative of Gauntlet, as this game is more in line with that than the TurboGrafx Dungeon Explorer titles. I recommend this game if you're a Gauntlet fan. Emulation is the best way to play this game given the market right now to purchase an original. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, I'll see you next time.